Most people over 60 have been told in one way or another that the body's ability to repair itself is behind them, that the energy and the recovery and the cellular vitality of younger years are simply gone, replaced by slower healing, stubborn weight, and the quiet resignation that this is simply what aging feels like. I want to challenge that belief today, not with optimism, not with vague encouragement, but with specific, peer-reviewed science that points to something genuinely extraordinary sitting dormant inside your body right now, waiting for the right signal to wake up. Well, I'm Dr. Naira Stein, Senior Health and Wellness Consultant, and if you are over 60 and you have been feeling like your body has quietly shifted into a mode you don't recognize, storing fat it never used to store, healing more slowly than you remember, recovering from effort in a way that takes days instead of hours, I want you to stay with me today. Because what I'm going to share with you involves a biological mechanism that most people have never been told about. 6 specific, accessible, evidence-backed methods that activate it, and a patient story that I carry with me because it changed the way I think about what is actually possible after 60. No injections, no clinic visits, no therapies that require a medical bill, just 6 things grounded in real research that you can begin implementing today. Let me start with the mechanism itself, because understanding it changes everything about how you interpret what follows. Inside your bone marrow right now, you carry a population of stem cells. Not at the depleted, exhausted level that most people assume aging leaves behind, but at what researchers from Stanford University have described as approximately 97% of their theoretical maximum, even in adults well past 65. Your stem cells are not gone. They are not depleted. They are dormant, switched off by a metabolic environment that has, through years of dietary patterns, reduced fasting periods, chronic low-level inflammation, and declining hormonal signaling, settled into a default mode of storage rather than regeneration. Here is what makes this particularly important. The biological switch that wakes dormant stem cells and the switch that releases stored fat are not 2 separate mechanisms requiring 2 separate interventions. They are the same switch, one mechanism governing 2 outcomes simultaneously. When the conditions are right, when the body receives the molecular signals it has been waiting for, stem cell mobilization and fat release happen together because they are both downstream consequences of the same fundamental shift in cellular metabolism. The regenerative medicine industry charges thousands of dollars to artificially trigger one side of this equation. What I am about to share with you addresses both sides at once through methods that cost almost nothing and can begin working within hours of your first implementation. I want to tell you about a patient before we go further, because his story is the reason I structured this particular conversation the way I did. He was 67 years old. He had carried stubborn abdominal fat for 6 years that did not respond to the dietary changes he was making. He was exhausted in a way that sleep did not fix. And there was a detail he mentioned almost as an afterthought, a cut on his hand that had taken 3 weeks to close. Not a serious wound, a minor laceration that a younger version of himself would have healed in 5 or 6 days. His stem cell activity, when tested, ranked near the bottom of the reference range for his age group. His body had quietly shifted from a regenerating system into a hoarding system. It was holding on to fat as stored energy because it no longer trusted its own ability to repair itself if that energy was released. We gave him 6 things to implement over a single day, not a month-long protocol, not a gradual lifestyle overhaul. 6 specific actions within 24 hours. His blood work at the following day showed measurable stem cell mobilization. Within 2 weeks, the fat that had been immovable for 6 years began to release. The wound equivalent, a small scratch I asked him to make note of, healed in 5 days. The same biology that had been locked in storage mode had been unlocked, and the 6 methods that did it are exactly what we are about to discuss. We will move through them in order from effective to extraordinary. I want you to pay particular attention to the third method because it produced the strongest stem cell mobilization response in controlled trials, and it costs absolutely nothing to implement tonight. The first method is one that has a reputation in popular health culture that actually undersells its specific effect on the biology we are discussing. Turmeric combined with black pepper. Not turmeric alone. The combination matters, and the research explains exactly why. The active compound in turmeric is curcumin, and a 2022 study published in the Journal of Stem Cell Research and Therapy examined what curcumin does specifically to mesenchymal stem cells, the stem cell population responsible for rebuilding bone, cartilage, and fat tissue. The findings were striking. Curcumin increased mesenchymal stem cell proliferation by 39% within 72 hours of exposure. But the study found something equally important happening simultaneously. Curcumin inhibited adipogenesis, the formation of new fat cells, while the stem cell population was expanding. It was promoting the cellular renewal you want and suppressing the fat accumulation you don't, through a single compound acting on a shared pathway. The challenge with turmeric, and the reason most people who consume it regularly never experience these effects meaningfully, is bioavailability. Curcumin is notoriously difficult for the human body to absorb. Consumed alone, most of it passes through the digestive system without entering the bloodstream in meaningful concentrations. A landmark study in phytomedicine established that piperine, the active compound in black pepper, increases curcumin absorption by 2,000%. That number is not an approximation. It is the measured pharmacokinetic difference between curcumin taken alone and curcumin taken with piperine. Without black pepper, the turmeric you consume delivers a fraction of what it is capable of delivering. The third element in the preparation that the research supports is fat. Curcumin is fat-soluble, meaning it requires the presence of dietary fat to be transported across the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. Combining 1 teaspoon of high-quality turmeric powder with a generous pinch of freshly ground black pepper and a small amount of olive oil or coconut oil, stirred into warm water, blended into a smoothie, or mixed into food, creates the complete delivery system the compound needs. Research from the European Journal of Nutrition found that taking curcumin with the largest meal of the day improved absorption by an additional 28% compared to taking it on an empty stomach, because the fat content of a full meal provides additional transport capacity. Consistency over time compounds the effect. The stem cell proliferation data appeared within 72 hours in laboratory conditions. The fat metabolism effects in human trials required approximately 8 weeks of daily use to produce measurable changes in body composition. Participants in a 2021 randomized controlled trial who consumed curcumin daily for 8 weeks lost an average of nearly 2 kilograms more body fat than the placebo group, with C-reactive protein, the primary marker of systemic inflammation, falling by 31%. Lower inflammation means stem cells survive longer, function more effectively, and are less likely to be redirected from repair toward managing inflammatory damage. Turmeric with black pepper and fat, taken daily and consistently, works on the problem from both directions simultaneously. The second method comes from a seed that has been used in traditional medicine for over 2,000 years, and that modern research is only now beginning to characterize with the precision it deserves. Black seed oil, extracted from Nigella sativa, contains a bioactive compound called thymoquinone that has emerged in recent years as one of the most potent natural stem cell activators in the scientific literature. A 2021 study published in Biomedicine and Pharmacotherapy examined thymoquinone's effect on hematopoietic stem cells, the population responsible for generating all blood and immune cells. and found a 45% increase in proliferation in the study models. When hematopoietic stem cells multiply at this rate, the downstream consequences reach the entire body. Stronger immune function, more efficient oxygen transport through the blood, and a dramatically enhanced capacity for tissue repair throughout every organ system. The fat-burning mechanism operates through a different but equally important pathway. Thymoquinone activates an enzyme called AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase, which functions as the body's master metabolic regulator. When AMPK is active, cells shift from fat storage to fat oxidation. They stop hoarding energy and start burning it. This is the same pathway activated by both exercise and fasting, which is why black seed oil can be stacked with the other methods on this list for compounding effect. It is accessing the same fundamental metabolic switch through a chemically distinct door. A 2020 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial followed 90 overweight participants taking 2 grams of black seed oil daily for 8 weeks. The black seed oil group lost an average of 3.2 kilograms of body weight, reduced waist circumference by 4.1 centimeters, dropped fasting blood sugar by 17%, and reduced triglycerides by 22%, all compared to placebo. These are not modest effects. They are the kind of numbers that, in a pharmaceutical trial, would represent a meaningful drug candidate. To use it correctly, the research consistently supports doses between 1 and 3 grams daily, roughly half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon. A 2019 pharmacokinetic study found that fasted absorption of thymoquinone was 34% higher than when taken with food, so first thing in the morning on an empty stomach is the optimal timing. The taste is strong and slightly bitter. A small amount of raw honey alongside it is not merely palatable. Research in the Journal of Food Science found that the combination of black seed oil and raw honey produces an anti-inflammatory synergy 67% greater than either compound alone. Source matters significantly. Cold-pressed organic black seed oil in dark glass is the only form worth purchasing. Heat and light degrade thymoquinone rapidly, and independent testing of commercial products has found that cheaper brands often contain less than half the thymoquinone claimed on their labels. The third method requires nothing you need to purchase. It requires no preparation, no equipment, and no financial investment of any kind. And it produced the strongest stem cell mobilization response of any intervention examined in the controlled trials that informed this list. Cold water exposure. When the body is immersed in or exposed to cold water, the nervous system responds with a surge of norepinephrine, a hormone and neurotransmitter that simultaneously triggers stem cell mobilization and activates the fat-burning mechanisms that most people spend years trying to unlock through other means. A landmark 2014 study in Bioscience Reports measured norepinephrine levels after 1 hour of cold exposure at 14 degrees Celsius and found a 530% increase from a single session, 5 times the baseline level from cold water alone. That norepinephrine surge directly activates brown adipose tissue, brown fat, a metabolically active tissue that, unlike white fat, which stores energy, actually burns calories to generate heat. A 2019 study in the Journal of Clinical Investigation used PET scanning to measure brown fat activity in subjects undergoing repeated cold exposure over 10 days, and found that brown fat volume increased by 42%, and resting metabolic rate rose by approximately 300 calories per day. 300 additional calories burned daily at rest, not during exercise, not during cold exposure itself, but simply because repeated cold exposure had expanded the body's brown fat infrastructure. The stem cell connection is direct and documented. A 2021 paper in Stem Cell Reports demonstrated that cold-induced norepinephrine stimulates mesenchymal stem cells in bone marrow to proliferate and mobilize into the bloodstream, with researchers measuring a 37% increase in circulating stem cells after just 5 consecutive days of cold exposure. Once mobilized, these stem cells travel through the bloodstream to damaged tissues throughout the body and initiate repair processes that would otherwise remain dormant. It is the equivalent of dispatching a repair fleet to every organ simultaneously, triggered by something as simple as cold water. Implementation does not require an ice bath or dramatic discomfort. The minimal effective dose, as identified in a 2023 meta-analysis in the British Journal of Sports Medicine reviewing over 100 studies, is approximately 11 minutes of total cold exposure per week, divided across 3 to 4 sessions. That translates to roughly 3 minutes at the end of each shower, 3 or 4 times per week. Begin with 30 seconds of cold water at the end of your regular warm shower. Increase duration by 30 seconds every few days until you reach 2 to 3 minutes per session. The water should be cold enough to generate a genuine urge to step away, approximately 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Face and neck exposure amplifies the response by triggering the dive reflex, which heightens the norepinephrine release. Breathe slowly and deliberately throughout. The fourth method asks you to do the opposite of eating, and the science of what happens during that absence is, in the context of stem cell biology, genuinely astonishing. Time-restricted fasting, implemented correctly, is one of the most powerful stem cell activation tools available to the human body after 60. In 2018, a research team at MIT published findings in Cell Stem Cell that fundamentally changed how the scientific community understood fasting and cellular regeneration. A 24-hour fast doubled the regenerative capacity of intestinal stem cells in both young and aged subjects. The subjects who were older showed the most dramatic response, meaning this particular intervention works better the older you are, which inverts the assumption most people carry about age and biological potential. The mechanism was precisely defined. Fasting forced cells to switch their fuel source from glucose to fatty acids, and this metabolic shift activated a signaling pathway called PPAR delta that directly enhanced stem cell function. A 2022 systematic review in the New England Journal of Medicine analyzed 27 clinical trials on time-restricted eating and found that participants who confined eating to an 8-hour window lost an average of 3 to 5% of total body weight over 8 to 12 weeks. Critically, DEXA scanning revealed that the fat lost was disproportionately visceral, the metabolically active, inflammatory abdominal fat that drives the greatest long-term health risk. Visceral fat decreased by 14% on average. Subcutaneous fat decreased by 6%. Fasting selects for the most dangerous and most stubborn fat because visceral fat is most responsive to the hormonal environment that fasting creates. The key threshold identified in a 2023 study in Cell Reports Medicine, comparing 12-hour, 16-hour, and 20-hour fasting windows, is 16 hours. Below that threshold, the body has not fully committed to fatty acid oxidation and has not activated autophagy, the cellular recycling process where damaged cellular components are broken down and repurposed in the concentrations needed to produce meaningful stem cell benefit. The minimum effective protocol is 16 hours without caloric intake, followed by an 8-hour eating window. Stop eating at 8 in the evening. Do not consume anything containing calories, sweeteners, or cream until noon the following day. Water, black coffee, and plain tea are compatible with the fasting state. A single teaspoon of milk in a morning coffee is enough to interrupt the metabolic transition. Growth hormone levels rise by up to 300% during extended fasting, according to data from the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology, directly fueling stem cell production and fat mobilization in the window between your last meal and your first. The fifth method involves a specific raw food that most people walk past in the grocery store without a second glance, and that contains what researchers have described as a master activator of the body's cellular defense and regeneration network. Broccoli sprouts. The 3 to 5 day old seedlings of the broccoli plant, eaten raw, contain concentrations of a compound called sulforaphane that can be up to 100 times higher than mature broccoli. Not slightly higher, 100 times. Sulforaphane activates a protein called NRF2 that sits inside every cell in the human body in a dormant state, waiting for the right molecular signal. A 2020 study in Aging Cell demonstrated that sulforaphane-driven NRF2 activation triggered the production of over 200 protective genes involved in reducing oxidation, calming inflammation, and directly shielding stem cells from the damage that diminishes their function over time. Neural stem cell survival increased by 52% in the study. A 2022 clinical trial in molecular nutrition and food research gave sulforaphane to participants for 12 weeks and measured a 13% reduction in visceral fat alongside significant improvements in insulin sensitivity, meaning the body shifted from a fat-storing to a fat-burning metabolic posture. The preparation detail that makes or breaks this intervention is temperature. Cooking destroys the enzyme, myrosinase, responsible for converting the sulforaphane precursor compound into active sulforaphane. A study in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry found that steaming broccoli for just 2 minutes reduced sulforaphane availability by 60%. Boiling eliminated it almost entirely. The sprouts must be eaten raw, and they must be chewed thoroughly, because the act of chewing physically brings myrosinase into contact with its substrate, producing sulforaphane in the mouth itself. Adding a small pinch of mustard seed powder to a cup of raw broccoli sprouts has been shown to increase sulforaphane production 4-fold, because mustard seeds carry additional myrosinase that amplifies the conversion. Growing your own sprouts from organic broccoli sprouting seeds is inexpensive, requires nothing more than a mason jar and tap water, and produces a continuous supply within 3 to 5 days. The sixth method is the one that the research community has described as perhaps the most significant discovery in this entire field, and it involves a form of carbohydrate that most people have either never heard of or have actively been trying to avoid. Resistant starch, and specifically the form created by cooking and then cooling ordinary white potatoes or white rice, produces within the gut a compound called butyrate that researchers are now calling the most potent natural stem cell regenerator ever identified in the nutritional literature. Resistant starch resists digestion in the small intestine. It passes intact into the large intestine, where specific bacterial populations ferment it and produce short-chain fatty acids, of which butyrate is the most biologically significant. A 2022 study at Stanford University, published in Science, found that butyrate increased intestinal stem cell regeneration by 68% within 48 hours. But the effects did not remain confined to the gut. Butyrate enters systemic circulation and crosses the blood-brain barrier, where a 2021 study in Nature Communications demonstrated it stimulates neural stem cell growth by 41%. It reaches the bone marrow and enhances hematopoietic stem cell proliferation. A single compound produced naturally by your own gut bacteria in response to resistant starch sends a simultaneous regeneration signal to every major stem cell population in the body. For fat metabolism, a 2023 randomized controlled trial in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition assigned participants to consume 30 grams of resistant starch daily for 8 weeks. The resistant starch group burned 22% more fat during sleep compared to controls, measured by overnight metabolic chamber testing. Fasting insulin dropped by 33%. Post-meal blood sugar spikes decreased by 28%. Lower insulin is the key. It is the hormonal condition that allows the body to actually access stored fat and use it as fuel, rather than locking it away behind an insulin barrier that prevents mobilization. The preparation is simple and requires nothing special. Cook white potatoes or white rice as you normally would. Allow them to cool completely in the refrigerator for at least 12 hours. During cooling, the molecular structure of the starch physically rearranges into a crystalline formation called retrograded starch that digestive enzymes cannot break down. A medium potato that contains 3 grams of resistant starch when hot contains 12 grams after refrigeration. The cooled starch can be reheated and retains approximately 80% of its resistant starch content, according to food science research from RMIT University. Cook a batch on Sunday, refrigerate it, and eat it throughout the week in whatever form suits you. Green bananas provide another excellent source, approximately 8 grams per banana, and blend almost invisibly into a morning smoothie. The clinical research supports a daily target of 15 to 30 grams. Timing this with the first meal of the 16-hour fasting protocol creates a compounding effect. Butyrate production peaks precisely when stem cells, primed by the fasting period, are most receptive to the regeneration signal. I want to close today by returning to where we began. A 67-year-old man with 6 years of immovable fat, exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix, and a wound that took 3 weeks to heal. He is not an exceptional case. He is a common one, a body that has shifted into storage mode, not because of irreversible damage, but because the signals needed to shift it back had not been present for a very long time. 6 methods. Turmeric with black pepper and fat, taken daily and consistently. Black seed oil on an empty stomach each morning. Cold water at the end of every shower, 3 times a week. A 16-hour daily fasting window that ends at noon. Raw broccoli sprouts with every salad or blended into every smoothie. And cooled resistant starch as the centerpiece of the first meal of each day. None of these require a prescription. None require a clinic. None require a budget that is beyond the reach of an ordinary household. What they require is the decision, made today, implemented today, to give your body the signals it has been waiting to receive. Your stem cells are not gone. They are waiting. And now you know exactly what to say to wake them up.